Welcome, everyone. I see a couple of you have entered in. This is going to be a webinar, so your cameras and microphones are off. But as you're entering, we invite you to jump into the chat and just kind of share what your current role in education is. So we'll get started in just a couple minutes. But as you wait, feel free to jump into the chat. Make sure you set your chat comments to everyone and share what your current role in education is. We'll start to get an idea of who's in our room tonight. And if you have questions during the webinar, feel free to use the Q&A feature, and we'll have some time at the end as well. So again, as you enter, we welcome you to jump into the chat and share your current role in education. If you noticed, Kathy Henderson is with us. She's in our chat. She's actually going to be watching the Q&A and answering those questions as we go through. She's currently a 6th and 7th grade math teacher and also helping out with us with the Desmos webinar tonight as a presenter. Looks like Jenny made a comment that the chat is disabled. Let's see if we can make sure that's on for you all. There we go. I see Jasmine wrote in there, so we must be able to get to the chat.
Yep, Nolan, I fixed it, so it should be accessible.
Awesome. Thank you, Liz. We got math tutor, we got math teacher algebra 1. Fantastic. Some more algebra teachers, coaches, geometry. Looks like a lot of secondary here. There's Kelly Middle School. There we go. Charlie, another middle school. High school geometry. Awesome, awesome. All right, nice to see the wide range of educators and roles in there, middle school, high school, and some specialists as well. So again, this is a webinar, cameras and microphones are off. You have questions during the webinar, feel free to use the Q&A feature. It seems to work a little bit better. And you can see a record of those questions and those answers there for you. As I mentioned, Kathy Henderson is going to be monitoring those throughout, but we're also going to leave time for questions at the end. And so what I'm going to do as we get started is have you join an activity. Okay, so if you can open up a separate window or tab and go to student.desmos.com and enter in that class code. Kathy also threw that link into the chat for you. We'll take you directly there and enter that code in for you. If you don't have a Desmos account, you can create one for free. And so you're going to be working through a Desmos activity as well as looking at the Zoom screen. So if you're able to be on 2 screens, that's going to work really, really well, where you can be looking at the Zoom on one screen and then working in the Desmos activity in the other. If not, you can always just kind of go back and forth between the 2 tabs. So when you enter into the activity, you're going to have 3 screens that you can work through just to kind of share some information so we can get an idea of, again, who's with us and where you're joining us from and kind of your experience level with Desmos as we get started. So I'm just going to give you a minute or two as people are still entering to jump into that activity. And just work through those first few screens of the activity as we begin. If you have any issues joining that activity, let us know either in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll be sure to help you out. And just navigate those first 3 screens to check in as we get started tonight. All right, so a few more people jumped in. If you're just joining the webinar, we are jumping into a Desmos activity. And so you can head to student.desmos.com and enter in that class code, work through those first 3 screens, and we'll get started in just a second as you complete those screens and we check in. As you maybe finish up those first few screens, I do want to thank you all for being here, taking time out of your evening to come and learn about building Desmos activities. My name is Nolan Doyle, and I am a full-time classroom teacher just outside of Richmond, Virginia, but also work as a presenter with Desmos and love sharing the wonderful things that these tools can do for you as a teacher and your students as well. So tonight we are going to take a look at how to build activities within Desmos and just kind of checking in to who's all joining here. It's a little bit about me. You can see where we're at, a little overlay feature on the dashboard. So everyone's towards the right, love it. So everyone's feeling positive. A little more varied, a little more spread out, pretty 50-50 looks like as far as energy and tiredness, which would be expected towards the end of the day here on this Tuesday. Where are we joining from? Let's see, the map looks like heavily the East Coast. We've got some out there in California, all the way down to Florida, all right, Oklahoma. So fantastic. We are spread out pretty well across the country as we're checking in here. Looking at familiarity with Desmos, love to see that we have a lot of you who have used Desmos activities with students, but not very often maybe, using Desmos frequently, and also a little activity building editing, so perfect. And we've even got someone who considers themselves pretty good at building Desmos. So wherever you're at, we're gonna have something for you this evening. All right, so a little bit about myself. We can see a little bit about you all who are joining us, and now just a little bit about Desmos. Again, this webinar is designed for teachers who are familiar with Desmos, so I'm hoping you know a little bit about Desmos, and we saw that with the experience levels as far as using activities and building activities. But just a reminder, I love this mission statement, and what we do at Desmos is wanting to build a world where students' access to the power and beauty of math doesn't depend on their place of birth, race, ethnicity, gender, or any other aspect of their identity. So it is about accessibility. All the tools you're going to see with, we're not focusing on the calculators, but those are free. But the activities and the activity builder you see tonight are free to help make that accessible to our students. And again, what it is we want to make accessible is the power and beauty of math. And so we're going to see that throughout the examples that you experience in the activity, and as well as what we build within an activity. On our agenda tonight, you can find a copy of our agenda at the bit.ly, and that's been thrown into the chat for you as well. And if you haven't gotten into the activity yet, you can still go to student.desmos.com and enter that activity code in that's shared in the chat, because we'll be going through that activity a little bit more as you experience it as a student. And then the majority of the time we'll be building an activity. You'll also see how to copy and edit activities towards the end. And we're going to leave you with resources to continue learning, most importantly, right? So there's only so much we can do in the short time we have this evening, but we will send you hopefully inspired and supported to continue your learning. And we will have some time at the end to answer any questions that you might have. As I mentioned before, Kathy's in the chat or also manning the Q&A. So if you have questions as they come up, throw them in there. And if she can't answer them, we'll get to them for you or point you in a direction to get that answer. What's not in our agenda, we're not going to be doing anything with the graphing calculator. We're not going to really be looking at the dashboard moves or teaching with the Desmos activities. We're not going to do anything with computation layer as far as building the activity or updates of new Desmos features. So if these are topics that you're interested in, head to help.desmos.com, and there's a professional learning section, and we have other webinars, we have other videos and resources that can help you with all those topics as well. We also have linked in the agenda, again, that bit.ly, that agenda there, the Desmos design principles, and it's a guide to building great activities, and also our equity principles. So you can refer to those as needed. But I invite you to kind of read through these right now. I'm not going to linger too much on this slide, but read through these design principles and keep them in mind as you go through the Desmos activity in just a minute. Think about how they show up in the different screens, and then also reflect on maybe how these principles have shown up in activities that you've already run in your classes. And really for me, I love the design principles because I think they apply to anything I'm using in my classroom, not just Desmos activities. It could be a paper and pencil activity. It could be anything I'm doing with my students. I think about a lot of these things as I'm creating and implementing them. All right, so again, if you have not gotten into the activity, please do that. And for about the next 10 minutes, you're going to experience this activity as a student in one screen. As you can also look back at my screen in Zoom, I'll have the dashboard up. And so I'm going to go ahead and open it up to screens 4 and 5. So go ahead and navigate those screens. And this is a sampling of different screen types to interact with. It's not a cohesive activity, okay? So this is not meant to be, you know, a progression of screens that you'd be using at once with your students. But before we get to the building aspects, so like I said, we're gonna do this for about 10 minutes, but before we get to the building piece of it, we want you to view some of the components that you can put into a screen when you're building. View that as a student, and maybe think about what the student experience is, what the students are doing as they go through these screens. So I'm gonna be about 2 minutes to navigate those. A lot of you have already jumped in, which is fantastic. If you are maybe joining us where you can't easily get on, maybe you're on a phone just listening and watching, I'll just kind of do a student view of those screens so you can kind of look at my screen and follow along. But probably about one more minute to navigate screens 4 and 5. All right, so as I look at my screen, and again, we're not going to spend a lot of time as far as facilitating and using the dashboard. That's a whole nother webinar that you can really dive into making use of these dashboard tools. But I can see your responses. I can see how far you've gotten through the activity and comparing kind of where we're at with these, turning on the answer key to see who's correct, who's not in that screen 4. Love screen 5 because there is no one correct answer or incorrect answer. So I can quickly scroll through the different responses that you all have graphed there as students. I can overlay it. This one's a lot to kind of look at once with that overlay, but a lot of times that sketch overlay comes in handy. So a lot of great things to talk about if we were doing this with our students. But I'm now going to let you navigate screens 6 and 7. And as you go through 6 and 7, what I want you to think about is just how these two screens are similar, but different experiences. Okay, so screen 6 and 7, how are these two experiences as the student similar and different? And these are all the screens that we're going to come back and build. Also keep in mind those building principles that we looked at before as you're doing these screens. So comparing 6 and 7, what's similar, what's different. Keeping in mind those design principles. I'll remind you what those were: creating opportunities for students to be right and wrong in different and interesting ways. Talking about feedback. So think about the types of feedback students are getting on these screens. Are we attaching meaning to student thinking when we give that feedback? Creating a need for the math, using a variety of resources, interrupting our biases. So again, as you're finishing up through screen 7, I love thinking about the different feedback or the opportunities to be right and wrong, right? So screen 5, you all were able to be right and even wrong in a lot of different and interesting ways that we could use the dashboard to talk about. I could pull up different student work, see who we agree with, who we disagree with. Screen 6, maybe a little bit more limited in our feedback, right? So we do have a couple formatted answers formatted different ways that could still be correct, but maybe just a little more limited in what students are getting as far as feedback or in the ways they can answer the question. Compared to screen 7, I love where they're going to have to decide who's correct. So I love there's a lot of Desmos activities. If you all are experienced, right? I saw that in the beginning screen of you've run a lot of activities with your students. The Desmos activities are designed to have a lot of these screens to check in where they have to kind of explain or defend one of their answers. So we get a little bit deeper into the student thinking and their understanding. All right, so now I want you to experience screens 8 and 9. The goal of screens 8 and 9 is just to experience the sketch component. So we will be building with the sketch component in just a few minutes. So think about the different sketch options. Play around with those screens as you're going through screens 8 and 9. And you'll notice in the top of the sketch component, you have a few options as far as points. And we've limited some of those options up there as far as how they can sketch without a line tool on screen 8. When you look at screen 9, those tools at the top of the sketch component look a little bit different. So you have some options as you're building as far as what's available to students when they're sketching. Think about those design principles. Think about the types of questions we've asked in order to take advantage of these sketch components and what students are doing. I love this idea of the challenge of, yeah, you can pick anything, but try to pick anything that works, obviously, as far as 5 units away, but try to pick points that no one else will, right? So trying to be a little clever, right? Challenging our students. Great question in the chat. So with the label tool, you should still be able to use the type there. Let's see if it's available. Yeah, so the math type tool is still available. So you could type in your coordinates, the label using the math tool. So there's 2 ways to enter in characters on the sketch tool. So I saw Eleanor had the question, how to label without the text tool. There is the math type, so you can still use the math type there to create a label for your points. All right, and then finally, last screen that I want you to experience as a student and that we will build in just a short time is a card sort. What I love about card sorts, they can be used in a variety of contexts. So that could include other content areas as well. I know really the Desmos Activity Builder in general at my school, the foreign language department, one teacher started using it, it's really taken off. They're using a lot of Activity Builder, and the card sorts in particular are really great for subject areas beyond just math. But play around with the card sort. The feedback, thinking about the feedback, you're not getting as the student any direct feedback, but I am on the dashboard. And sometimes I know when my students are doing, it might flash up what it looks like from the dashboard using those anonymous names. So no one has to be embarrassed if they've got incorrect ones, but they can glance and see, hey, you know what, I've got a group that's incorrect. I need to go back and maybe fix that. So kind of flash that up every now and then eventually if students aren't getting those matched up correctly, I go and help them. But all right, so another maybe minute just to get through that card sort. If you're not able to join, I've got the card sort student view from my end. All right, so you've had some time to explore. And I just saw in the Q&A, Kathy handled the question, but if you didn't see it, someone was asked about how to give feedback directly to students. You can use some computation layer and help.desmos.com can get you started with some of that computation layer as far as supporting creating maybe that feedback directly to the student. So let's head back to our presentation. Now that you've had time to kind of experience the activity, we're really going to spend the rest of the time building, okay, that activity. And we're going to skip those first three screens, the ones that kind of introduced who you all were and where you were kind of checking in tonight. But we're going to build from scratch. And so at this point, I do want to give you the option and invite you to kind of choose whether you just want to watch my screen and take notes as I go. So depending on your setup, as well as maybe your experience level and how well maybe I'm going too quick or not quick enough. But you can just watch and take notes, or you can follow along and build right with me. So definitely if you have the setup to be looking at two screens and you're able to do that, please do so. Or you can just sit back and take some notes as you watch me go through the different steps. All right, so we're going to head to teacher.desmos.com. And I'm already logged in, but you would log in the upper right hand corner with your account. You can set up an account just with any email address. And we're going to go to custom activities on the left-hand side. So when I go to custom activities, this is going to be my first one, right? So I have none that I've created yet, or maybe copied and edited, which we'll see how to do later on at the end. We're going to create from scratch. So we're going to smash this blue button in the upper right-hand corner to create a new activity. We're going to give it a name. So this is a webinar tonight, so I'm going to name it after that. We can make it private. So this would mean I'm the only person that can view this. Now, I want to make sure you understand it's not going to go to teacher.desmos.com where people can search for it there. It might show up in a Google search, or also if you want other teachers to have access to it and be able to use it, then you would want to make sure that it is public and not private. So we're going to go ahead and create that new activity. And this is what it looks like to build. So at the top of the screen, I'm going to have where I can add screens. looks like the dashboard a little bit when you can navigate those different screens. And then over on the left-hand side are the different components that will be added to my screen here. And I did notice a question about, can you change the privacy? You can change it at any point. So I can come in and edit this activity. And when I hit that little chain link up here, I can change that privacy there. And I have some other options as far as radians, degrees, and allowing students to use the calculator on the screens as well. All right, so we've got our first screen, and we're going to go ahead and hit the title up here, and we're going to call this sort. And we had that ordered list, if you remember. So we were moving the amoeba, the ladybug, and the dog. So we're going to add the ordered list component. So that pops up in the main screen area. And we had our options that we're going to go ahead and type in. I can just hit enter or click below to add another option. The other thing is you can do math type. We're not doing any math type here, but you can really format quickly, exponents, fractions, and different things like that. You can type PI, you can pi symbol in there. So that math type is really helpful for those math type questions or selections. And we're ordering from the smallest to largest. So I'm going to type that in there. We can also add the picture. I don't have that nice picture that was there, but we can do that through a media picture. And it was to the right. So once I add multiple components, I can move them around with those 3 lines. If I click and hold, I'm just going to drag. We have some different options of how they're going to be laid out. And I can choose a file to upload. I have this fraction picture. I know it doesn't fit, but just to show you how you can just, if you have an image saved on your computer, we can add it. And then in the upper right-hand corner, I'm not ready to publish, but I can preview this. And this is what the student's going to see. So they'll see the picture. They have, we're going from smallest to largest. You know what I forgot to do is to make sure I want an answer key. So sometimes we might be ordering things and there's not one way to do it. There is one way to do this. So we want an answer key. So I'm going to use the order as an answer key. I can randomize. And so now it's going to randomize what students see the order and they see it. And so this would be the answer key. So I'm going to make sure we put that in there from smallest to largest. And so now when I hit preview, you'll see in the at the top here, dashboard preview. So this is not what the student will see, this part of it, but this is what you'll see for that student on the dashboard. So once they start interacting with it, you'll see either the X or the check once they have it correct. Okay, so that first screen here, we had 2 components, the ordered list component and a media component. And we went ahead and we wanted to specify to students we're going from smallest to largest. We typed in our choices. We can add more items if we wanted to. And then we also said we have an answer key for this screen, so we want to make sure that's clicked there. All right. Let's go ahead and add the next screen. And so we're going to title this one topic. Said linear inequalities. Okay, so this is the screen where we were going to graph a linear inequality. We had 2 points plotted. So there are 2 components that deal with the graph. There is this graph component here. And if I scroll down, a full screen graph. So the full screen graph, I'm going to go ahead and add that to my screen. Once I do that, I have no other option because that is the full screen. That's going to be all the student sees on that slide. And so when I hit preview, there's the full screen graph, and I have the title here. Okay, I have the title here. And at this point, the benefit of the full screen graph is that students will be able to enter in something to graph. Right, so they could enter in their inequality like we did when you experienced it as the student. Now, with that said, we are going to, since we can't add another component, we're going to need to put the directions up here. So we're going to go ahead, this is our topic. but we need you to create a linear inequality that captures both points as solutions. So again, if I hit preview, now they've got that direction and they're still able to use that graph and plot. What we need are those 2 points. So I'm going to go ahead and add those 2 points. Leave those with the 2 points that we had and saw earlier. I'm going to go ahead and change them to be the same colors and click and hold to make them both red. But when I go to preview, I don't want students to have them right here. I don't want them, maybe they'll delete them and then they're gone, or they'll edit them. So we want to hide those from our students. So what we're going to do is we can create a folder. So if I hit that plus, I'm going to add a folder and I'm going to slide those up, and you see this line extends to that point now. It's part of that folder. And there's the lovely option here to hide this folder from students. So now those 2 points will stay there. The students will not be able to edit them, delete them, or interfere with anything that's already there. So now when I go to preview, this all will disappear and the student is free to graph their inequality. As I mentioned kind of earlier with the dashboard and looking at it, I love this type of question because of it's open-ended, right? There's lots of ways to be correct. There's lots of really rich discussions that you can have with students when you get so many different answers. And when I say right, also wrong answers, right? So we can really talk about student work and display it. So as you're building screens, think about that. Think about the dashboard. Think about those design principles. How are you going to make use of that dashboard with the type of question and the different components that you're adding for your students? All right, let's go ahead and add another screen. All right, and so for this one, we're going to go ahead and title this slope. This is where we compared the 2 different screens, how they were similar, how they were different. We're going to go ahead and add a graph component. So not the full screen graph. So let's notice the difference there. So when I go to preview, you'll notice now this graph component compared to the full screen, the student does not have access to graph anything. Okay, so whatever we want to appear on that graph needs to be done ahead of time by clicking on the graph to edit it here. All right, and I believe the line we had was y equals 1/2 x plus 3. So I'm entering that in, editing it from the graph component. When I hit preview, that's what the student will see, and they cannot add anything to that graph or edit it in any way. All right, so that's the difference between just the regular graph component and the full screen graphing calculator that we saw on the last one. We need to add a math input box and a note component. So the last screen, we put all our directions in the title, but we don't have to do that on this one because it's not full screen. So we're going to add a note. And this is only for adding a note for a student to read. We need that other component where they can respond. So we just wanted to ask, what is the slope of the line? You got some formatting options here. You can add that math type again, italics and bold. You can add a hyperlink in there as well. And so now I need a place to respond. We can do free response if it's text, or math response. In this case, since it's a numerical value, we're going to do math response. And what that allows is, as they enter it in, they can pull up all the different calculations there. And then so when you enter in the 1/2, it's going to automatically format it and also give the value out here like a calculator. So that's the difference between a math response versus a free response, which just would be regular text. The other thing with the response is you have different options here. So we can prompt the student to then have to explain, and we can also show students their classmates' responses. So when you think about different feedback, sometimes being able to see their classmates' responses might get them to rethink their answer. That might be something we want them to do. or it might be something we want to see their responses and not be influenced by their classmates, as far as us seeing it on our end. So just depending on what your goal is for that screen and kind of the context of the activity. So when I hit preview, now when I type in the 1/2, I got to hit submit, and now I need to explain. When I share with class, then 3 other students' responses would show up here. So I think you experienced that from your end as the student earlier on, but that's what those options would look like. And you can remove those or add them using that checkbox right there. The other thing I like is that we can always convert that to a sketch as well. So maybe part of their explanation and justification is them to sketch on the graph, and maybe they're going to sketch that rise over run. So we can see a little bit more of their thinking by allowing them to sketch right on there. So we can convert back and forth between sketch and a graph. All right. So we're going to add another screen. And actually, what we're going to do, I'm going to delete that one. And we're going to, since this one is very, very similar, we're going to go ahead and click these 3 buttons here, and we're going to duplicate. So what that does, it saves me some time. Again, 3 dots right here, duplicate the screen. This screen's going to be similar, but I can just, instead of having to start from scratch again, just edit a little bit. So we're going to leave some of the components, and we're going to settle dispute based on that same graph. So we're going to change up the question a little bit, hopefully get a little bit more from our students. And we're going to go to our note, and we've got there says the slope is 2. Tifa says the slope is, and I'm going to go to math type to do the 1/2. That'll just make it look a little bit better. Back to text. Who is correct? All right. Now, I don't want the math input because they're not going to give me the slope. They're going to have to choose. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that component, and I'm going to add the multiple choice. So I have my options that I can add. Tifa or neither. All right, and then we do have a correct answer. So Latif is correct. So I'm going to mark the correct answer by clicking that little dot there. Love the options. You can, again, easily do math type, but you can also add graphs and images as your multiple choice options. We don't need to in this screen, but you can quickly add a graph. Doesn't make sense here, but you can graph whatever you want, and that could be one of your choices. So love that about the multiple choice there. So we've got our multiple choice options. We still want our students to explain. Maybe this time I don't want to show the students their responses, their classmates' responses. So I hit preview. You'll notice I get a dot instead of a check here because this is saying, hey, there's something you're going to have to read, their explanation. You want to look a little bit further. If they do select the wrong answer, you will still see the X. Okay, so the dot is saying they've got the right selection, but do they have a correct justification as far as how they came up with that answer, right? So the dot is signaling there's something for you as the teacher to interpret on that screen that the computer can't. All right, well, let's head to our next screen, screen 5. And this one, we're going to plot some points. So in order to plot some points, we need a sketch. So I'm going to find the sketch component on the left-hand side. Love the sketch. So right now it is just a blank background. So if I hit preview, I've got all the tools up here, and I can just draw with all those tools on a blank background. You can put any image you want. So I have a fraction one. I'll just show you how easy that is. And you can draw directly on that image. And then we can also just have an editable graph. So right now it's blank, but I could add anything on there to maybe sketch on top of it. The student wouldn't be able to edit that, but they would be able to draw on top of it. So again, we can have it blank. You can have any image you want or an editable graph, which I'm going to leave blank. All right. And actually, I do need to add the point. 3, 2. And it had that nice label of A. So I'm going to check the label there. And instead of showing the coordinates, I'm going to label it A. When I hit the 3 dots of the sketch component, this is where I can limit some of those options that we saw. So if I unclick the text, math, the lines, okay, I just want the pencil because I just want to plot a point. And if I want them to label it, I think we still had the math type because that question came up. So now when you hit preview, you can see those tools are a little more limited. And they'll still have the erase tool. I'm not going to get rid of that. All right, but we do need to add a note to give some directions. So our directions here are to plot 2 points that are each 5 units away from point A. And then I'm going to go down and say try to pick points that nobody will label. Go ahead and hit preview. And that's all we need. We've got our title, we've got our note component with the directions, and we've got our sketch and all the tools that they need for that to plot their points. Again, thinking about some of those design principles, right? So allowing them to come up with different answers, challenging them, maybe some differentiation here, right? To push some of our students to think of how could we get 5? Could we 4, 1, 2, 3, right? Kind of thinking maybe create that 3, 4, 5 triangle, come up with some of those different points, and maybe form a circle with that sketch overlay on the dashboard. So lots of possibilities for students to be creative and then make their student work kind of the star of your instruction as you go over it. All right, so screen 5 and screen 6 was very similar. So I'm going to hit that 3 dots again and duplicate again. So now screen 5 and screen 6 are exactly the same, but we're going to plot more points. We're going to change the sketch background so it's blank. So I go back into the editable graph and just go ahead and X that out. And our instructions are going to change as well because that point A is not there anymore. So what we need to plot now is they need to plot a point on the graph and label it A. Then plot 2 points that are each 5 units away. A. And we're still challenging them to try to pick points nobody else will. And we're still going to label the points. We can hit preview. And now we've got that blank graph instead of the point that was already there for them. All right. Heading to our final screen, screen 7. This is where we're going to do the card sorts. I love card sorts. Love them, love them, love them. No more laminating and cutting and all the things with the paper card sorts. And I love the dashboard too, because we can really see what students are doing. We can save their work and always come back to them as well. So with this card sort, it's another one of those full screen components. We saw that earlier with the full screen graphing calculator. So when I hit card sort here, I now, since it's full screen, can't have any other components, but I have some different options for the card types. So we can add math or text. We can add any image we want and a graph as well. So similar to some of those options we saw with the multiple choice. So I'm going to go ahead and do math. And this is where we had the linear and non-linear. I'm going to go ahead and add that title too. So we had linear or non-linear as our question. And so we've added 2 text cards. And I'm going to make these large. So right now I've made one of them large, one of them is not. So you can see a little bit of the difference that this one is larger than the other one. So I'm going to make both of those large since they're kind of our title ones. I'm also going to make those bold just to make them show up a little better for our students. Okay, so we're going to group linear and non-linear. I'm going to still stick with math or text, but now I'm going to be able to throw in that math type. So we've got y equals x. Non-linear, y equals x, the value of x. Math type again, y equals x. And then if I do shift 6, I can do an exponent. We'll format that through the math type. And let's do one more linear. I'm going to hit preview. I can now see those cards. They're smaller. They're not in bold. And they're formatted really nicely with that math type. And then let's go ahead and add some graphs. So when I hit that graph card, I'll do that again. Oops, delete that. So as I hit that graph, it prompts me to put whatever I want in there. So let's do a linear one. Hit done. Let's do non-linear. And let's do that constant function. So I hit preview, and now I've got all the cards. You'll notice in the top, that dashboard preview up here is just a dot. I don't have an answer key. So I want an answer key so that it can grade it. Again, the student won't get this feedback, but I will on the dashboard as the teacher on my end. And so I'm just going to group whichever ones I want. And now that answer key is there. I can go back and edit it whenever I need to. Now when the student's interacting, it's at X until they've got them all correct is when the check mark will come up. All right, so again, this was a full screen component. So just kind of go here. That was in my screen. I know with my resolution, I have to scroll down to one of the full screen components for the card sorts. And then we have 3 different options. I'll show you the image again. We'll go back to that lovely fraction image. Oops, did it twice. But you can just add any image you want, and that can be your card sort. Or you could do the graph like we did and math or text. So when I hit preview, now I just have that card with that image there. All right. So we've got 7 main screens that we've created. And we created those all from scratch using the different components. We didn't get to all of them, but if you go to our resources and again, help.desmos.com, you can really dig into some of those other components that we maybe didn't get to, or come back to some of these and go at your own pace a little bit more as far as adding those components and seeing them. But what I want to show you now is that we can actually copy any screen we want from another activity, which is really cool and really helpful. You didn't always used to be able to do this. So I'm going to go back to teacher.desmos.com. And I'm going to find under the featured collection starter screens, I want to check in with my students, kind of similar to what I did with you all tonight before they jump in. Hey, how are they feeling? So I can go to any activity I want, go to the preview at the bottom, And if I click on the screen I want, this little copy this screen, so I can hit Control C, or I can just click this button, and now it's copied. And I can go back to my activity. I want it towards the front, so I'm going to click there, and I'm going to do, you can't see me doing this on my keyboard. I'm going to hit Control V, and bam, that screen pops up. I can reorder it. And so now my students will check in with me before going through the rest of the screens that I've built. So I'm going to do that one more time, just because I love this feature. You go to any activity you want, click on a screen, I'll do a different one, click that copy, and then go back to where you're building and hit Control V. And now it's in your activity for you. All right, so at this point, we've got our activity. We're going to go ahead and publish, or we can save it. So if we are done to publish, I've got my own activity. It's going to be found under custom activities. It will also show up for me if I search it. So if I hit intro, it does pop up for me. It will not for anyone else at teacher.desmos.com. But you're now ready. Getting a little lost here. Custom activities, that activity. You're now ready to assign and run that with your students. If we want to go back and edit it, I remember someone said, can you go back and even just change whether it's public or private? You can do that, and you can edit anything you want. You just hit those three dots and you can edit your activity. If it is public or you share it with another teacher, they can make a copy and then they can edit it however they want. Or you can make them an editor so you guys have the same version no matter what, whether you edit it or that other teacher edits it. So you can add them and manage who is actually able to edit that activity. And I guess I will show you that other screen again, where you can make it private, but also this ratings and degrees, so you can default to either one for the activity. And I want to check this. So you can have the calculator available to students within the activity. So either the 4-function scientific or graphing. If I go to student preview now, the student's able to pull that calculator up as they're working through and have access to it on each screen wherever they need to. So again, I can save this draft now that I've published it once, or I can delete it altogether, or I can go ahead and just publish it with the changes. All right, the last thing I want to do is just how to copy and edit an activity that's already out there. So I'm just going to search. The plane is a good one. Let's say there's a pre-made activity that you love, but there are some changes you want to do. So I just want to make sure you realize how to do that. We can go ahead and click when we're on the activity page, those three dots again, and copy and edit. And now you can go through if you wanted to delete certain screens. If you wanted to add one of those check-in screens, right, you could do what we just did to our activity where we copy and paste a check-in screen or a screen at the end to kind of see or check their understanding. You can change the wording. Sometimes maybe there's some vocabulary that you use a little bit differently in your class or for your students. You can edit that as far as in the notes or really anything you want to do with that activity. I'm going to click here and change the name. I'm doing this in my lesson 1.3 and then publish that my version. So this is my own unique version here.
Hey, Nolan.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, it's Kathy.
Yeah.
Could you take a moment and go back and show them how to get the calculator turned on all the slides in the activity once again, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I went kind of quick on that one. So I'm going to go back to Let me just go back into that custom activity and go back, hit that 3 dots, and I'm going to edit. So up here, when I click on the activity details, you can click either one of these. There's a little checkbox here. So I can enable any of those calculators. And again, what this does, it's not adding a component to any of the screens. It's just from the student perspective, they're going to be able to click on it and it will pop up for them to be able to use as they're working. And it's actually nice. I use this a lot, especially when we're doing remote learning, but it was able for me to see some of the students' work. I remember in geometry, like they were working through sine and cosine and different of the trig functions. And so I was able to see the student work a little bit more because it will save there and you'll be able to see that from the dashboard as well. So that's a helpful tool where they're not just going to a separate tab where maybe you can't see what they're doing, but it gives you a little more insight into their work and their thinking. All right, so we went through a lot. You got a little experience again, seeing that student perspective. We built some activities, or we built some screens within an activity, and you saw how to copy and paste screens. You saw how to copy and edit different activities that were already there. So at this point, I encourage you to kind of level up your skills with the articles, the tutorials, and the support resources at help.desmos.com. It's a really great site for you to just search anything you need. If as you're getting started, if you're not sure where to start, there are different options. So I'll just head there just to show you real quick. Right, so you can search. But if you, again, are looking to continue to build and learn more, there's a section on building. And you can see all the different articles there as far as getting started. And we said we didn't do any computationally. If that's something you're interested in, there's an introduction under there as well. The survey for the night, we really encourage you to do. You're going to get that in a follow-up email. Also, completing that survey will give you a certificate of attendance. So be on the lookout for that follow-up email that will have that survey for you. And please, that helps us figure out, hey, what do you need as your next steps to? What can we provide you in the future now that you've done this introduction to building? So be on the lookout for that. And also the help.desmos.com. In addition to that, you can email support@desmos.com. Super, super responsive. So there's no question too small, too large. Like, don't feel like you're bothering anyone or that your question is silly. Reach out and ask those questions. Also, maybe there's something you would love to see within Activity Builder. You have suggestions, feel free to shout those out to us as well. And the Desmos Educators Group on Facebook is awesome. You can, if you're on Facebook, you can throw questions out there, you can share things. So please join that community as well as you continue to learn more. All right, I just want to, we're wrapping up here. We can still take some more questions, but I do want to make sure that I thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate you taking time out to learn more about building your activities and hope that you are inspired, as well as you feel supported with the resources that we're leaving you with to continue learning more and using it more. Any questions you have in the chat, please let us know. And again, make use of that help.desmos.com. And we encourage you to email support@desmos.com as questions come up. We will hang out for a couple more minutes if there's any questions. I don't know if Kathy, there's anything we didn't get to. Pull up the Q&A and chat as well.
Eleanor asked a great question. Whether or not we can have 2 ordered lists in a component, and it's my understanding that not yet. That is not available yet. But I could be wrong. So Eleanor, I can reach out to support at Desmos and we'll find out and let you know. Okay.
Yeah. Let me just even look in there, see if I can't see what happens if I try to add one. So 2 ordered lists. There's one. Looks like you can.
I was wrong. That's awesome.
Yeah.
There you go, Eleanor.
Make sure what that looks like. Yeah. And you could have a note or something to separate them. We can put them side by side. Yeah, so it looks like you can. See if we can have 3. 3, 4. How many ordered lists can we add? Lots of ordered lists. So yeah, great question. All right. I don't see anything in the Q&A. Let me pull up the chat. Yeah, see Emily's question. I was not sure. I'm not sure of a way if you're asking for the student to be able to have the question run aloud to them. Yeah, I don't believe there is a way as of right now to do that. All right. Seems like we're wrapped up. So again, thank you all for joining. And if questions do come up, please reach out to support at desmos.com or head to that help.desmos.com page as well. So thanks again. I hope you all have a great evening and take care.